Good evening, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started. Sorry for the delay. Just had a few IT issues.
Yeah, but
Thanks, everybody, for coming to the Tuesday, April 4th meeting of the New London Planning Board. And we have a short but familiar agenda tonight to talk about the Twin Pines Housing Trust. So we'll go ahead and get started with that, and then we will do some public comment and things like that. But do you guys want to jump in? Oh, and I'm sorry, one reminder, you are being recorded tonight. Thank you.
Great. Thanks very much. Good evening, members of the Planning Board. Thank you very much for letting us join you on this Tuesday evening. Andrew Winter, Executive Director at Twin Pines Housing Trust. With me, Aaron Lambert, David Crandall, Ken Viscarello, our engineer, our Director of Development, Fundraising, and Ken Viscarello, our counsel. So I'm going to dispense with this is, I think, the sixth time I've been in front of you, fifth time I've been here to talk in detail. So I'm going to assume a certain familiarity with the project and really just turn it over to Aaron to talk about the changes since we were with you last week. As you know, we learned 2 weeks ago, less than two weeks ago, that the water precinct would not be able to provide us with domestic water service. And so at that point, we started looking at a well, and Aaron's going to kind of go through the plans, which now incorporate all of the various elements. We've filled in all of the blanks. No worries. But we filled in all the blanks since, and that may be my cue to get off stage, but we filled in all the blanks from last week. So with that, I'll turn it over to Aaron Lambert.
Thank you, Andrew. Can everybody hear me? I'm not a big fan of microphones. So since last we were here, we had talked about the things we were going to do to accommodate a well or a public water supply or a private water supply on our property. So what we've done in the last week is we've detailed that out in our drawings. So the only plan that really impacted was our utility plan. I've gone ahead and updated my slides to help you see those changes, because otherwise I realize it's just a maze of black and white lines. I've highlighted, although I apologize, they're not jumping out as boldly as I had hoped. The red will be the fire distribution service. So that looks like you are familiar with. We are not making changes to that. So the idea is that we will come off of County Road with an 8-inch water line that will run through our property. There'll be a 6-inch service to each building to provide sprinkler protection to the 4 buildings. In addition, there will be a stub brought off for the future development of the historic barn to become a community center in the future. So that utility extension will be brought to the building as part of this project. And then one of the other things we talked about last week was the request by the fire department for us to carry our line through the property and connect to another 8-inch line that runs through the woods to the Fenwood property. And so what I've done is I've shown you on the plan where those different lines would be. So this would be a redundancy. They call it gridding. They like to have, locations where water feeds into the system from multiple directions. It's good for water quality. It's good for pressure, redundancy if there's a break, if there's a fire, all of those things. So there would be a couple of easements associated with that are now on our plan. One of them is a proposed easement on Fenwood's property. It would be 20 feet wide. We would probably only need to clear 10, but you need to keep that clear of trees. And that would be so that Twin Pines was the responsible party for owning and maintaining that line, and it would give us permission to do the initial construction. If you go a little further towards our property, there's a small portion that would be on the property to the south, which Twin Pines does have an option to purchase. So we are going to formalize an easement over that as well, which grants the 7.6 acre parcel permission to build, own, and maintain a water line there. Which brings us to the on-site water supply. So what we will do is we will, through the New Hampshire DES process, drill, test, and develop a well on our site. I've shown that on the plan. There's a blue dot, and then you see a much bigger blue circle. We talked a little bit about this last week, but just to walk through that again. So the DES has a prescribed protective radius called the sanitary protective radius, and the size of that depends on how much water you're drawing. So for example, a single-family home would typically have a 75-foot protective radius. This project requires 10 to 12,000 gallons a day. It would have a 150-foot protective radius. And what we need to do is we need to make sure there are not certain things in that radius. For example, our road, a septic system, any hazardous materials. So we have designed our site so it doesn't include any of those items. We're not on septic, not an issue. And what we will also do is put restrictions on the property to the south that ensures that they also, have a covenant or something on their deed. And that's what Ken will formalize to ensure that they too are not allowed to put any of those things in the protective radius. Buildings are allowed, but not roads or other, like they couldn't put a septic system, they couldn't put hazardous materials. An underground storage tank of like oil or something to that effect would not be allowed in this radius. So what our plan does is it shows a pipe coming from the wellhead to a pump house. So typically you would build a standalone pump house, would include pumps, pressure tanks, any treatment that's needed to remove things like sediment or arsenic or radon. In lieu of building a separate building, we're going to plan to reuse the garage that's already there. The other element, though, that we'll need would be a storage tank. DES prescribes how big that will be. You basically need to store between a day and a half's worth of water. Because we have high groundwater here, we anticipate we will have an above-ground storage tank. So we have designated that in the corner nook, so it'll blend in. Depending on the size, we will try to put it in the garage. Maybe we can do 2 tanks if we can do that. So then they wouldn't see them at all. That will be something that we work through during the design and development process, and everything will need to be permitted through DES. And the last element of that is there will be a generator dedicated to running the pumps so that we will still have water. They're not going to be connected to the buildings, but they are going to run the water pump station. So from there, you can see a series of blue lines. So we will run domestic or potable water from the pump house to each of the buildings and also a line to the future community building in the historic barn. Those lines will not mix, so we won't be taking any domestic water off of the fire lines, and we won't be connecting our well to the public water supply, which is run by the New London Springfield Water Precinct. They'll be totally separate systems. So that, in summary, is what we have incorporated into our plans on water. Does anybody have any questions before I talk about other things?
I just wanted to make one clarification.
Sure.
The easement request was from the water precinct, not the fire department.
Oh, I
correct?
apologize.
Okay.
Yes.
No problem.
I
Just want to make
apologize.
sure for the minutes.
Yep.
Thanks.
Yes, we have a letter that should be in there. Yes, the water precinct requested it. In our department heads meeting, the fire department supported that request, but the request came from the water precinct. Thank you, Adam. If you go to the next slide. The other easement that we are finalizing is regarding the sewer. We went to some pretty extensive measures to locate a sewer we could connect to by gravity to avoid putting in a pump station. So we've been working collaboratively with New London Hospital, and they have been a great partner in allowing us to pursue this option. So with that, we are working through the details of a 20-foot wide easement on their property, which would allow us to construct, own, and maintain the sewer that connects to their manhole. And then after discussions with the Department of Public Works, as well as the facilities director at the hospital, we're also entering into discussions about contributing to annual maintenance and things that are required just to ensure that the sewer remains at full capacity for both the hospital and our users. So that sewer easement is now on our plans. It's 20 feet wide, and it's shown on that slide. Does anybody have any questions on sewer? Yeah, no, go ahead.
So are you still planning to tear down the house, but leave the garage?
Correct.
And the barn?
Correct, yes. The house is planned to be demolished, but the barn and the garage are both going to stay.
Okay, thank you.
And so while I'm here, I think I'll just take a minute because it's been a little while since I made my initial presentation. We have two applications before you. One is a lot line adjustment and one is the site plan. Adam, they're probably down further if you want to scroll down. Yep, the next one would be great. Perfect. Okay. So the existing lot, the farmhouse is its own lot. It has a frontage on County Road, and its rear lot is that green line that you see. It's currently 1.59 acres. So our lot line adjustment application is requesting that we rotate that green line counterclockwise, and it would now be the blue line, which makes that map 72, lot 17, 7.68 acres, and that is the plan, that is the site plan that you see before you as part of our site plan application. Lot 15 would be reduced from 40 acres to 3401. Both lots remain completely compliant with the zoning, and so we request approval of that lot line adjustment. As part of our site plan application, we're requesting two waivers, and since it's been a little while, I thought I would just walk through those in case anybody had any questions. So the first one is a request to reduce the number of parking spaces. So the zoning ordinance requires 2 parking spaces per unit, per apartment. So we would be required to have 120 parking spaces. We only have, of the 60 units, 40 are 1-bedroom and 20 are 2-bedroom. So we feel that 120 parking spaces would provide more parking than is needed. And we've been working collaboratively with the town to try to reduce our impervious area. Twin Pines has anecdotal evidence and from their other projects that 1.5 parking spaces really provides adequate parking both for residents and visitors. So we are requesting relief from a 2 parking space requirement to 1.5. We're actually providing 109 spaces, and the reason for that, not going just down to the 90, is we have 8 ADA accessible spaces. We want to make sure there are always parking spaces available for residents. We are also planning on putting charging stations in, and those charging stations may not be a permanent parking space. I envision somebody would park their car there to charge it, but then they would go put their car in a permanent parking space so that somebody else could use the charger. So we didn't want to bring it down to the 90 and have some of those not be available because they were being used for, say, charging stations or designated as accessible. So the site plan has 109 spaces, 8 are accessible. We're showing 3 of them being deferred. They're right in front of the community building. And so when the community building gets built in the future, there's a nice patio there. We provide accessibility to both doors. And those 3 parking spaces, it would make the most sense to construct those at that time. 2 of those would be accessible. And then the second waiver request, Adam, thank you, is a slight change to your parking space and aisle requirements. The ordinance has a couple of different parking space requirements that vary with what you're providing for an aisle width. So a 10 by 20 space requires a 24-foot aisle. We're requesting the spaces go to 9 by 18 with a 24-foot aisle. We find this is a very standard space throughout New Hampshire, and I've cited a few other surrounding towns that comply with this standard. We did meet with the fire department. We've run truck turning movements through the parking lots to ensure that the trucks can circulate, that these reduced aisles or parking space lengths won't negatively impact their ability to access the site. So at the bottom of each parking lot, the aisle is actually 26 feet. So we know where we needed it to say 26, but for the most part, the road and most of the parking aisles are 24 feet, and that provides ample room for the fire truck to circulate through. The school bus, we know, is not planning to come through the site because they prefer to stay in the public right-of-way. So we've built a kiosk for students to wait in inclement weather near the intersection with County Road. But the school bus also can make its way through the site were it to need to do so for any reason. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have about the waivers or the lot line adjustment.
I have a question about the charging stations.
Sure.
Is that just for the residents, or is that open to the public?
It's a great question. I'm going to let Andrew tackle it.
And I'm going to say, great question, and not one that I really have an answer to, in the sense that we are just installing our very first EV charging stations this spring in Vermont, and there we actually had a source of funding that requires that we make it available to anybody. The reality is that it sort of reads as a residential property. Several of these charging stations will be at the far end of the site. Several, they're not going to necessarily be obvious to people driving by if people know that they're there. There's not going to be a sign up that says, no, this is only for residents. The expectation is that it would be available for residents first. But I don't believe we're going to have any sign. We are not going to have any signage that would prohibit others from accessing those.
With the collaboration with the hospital on the sewer, does that open up that charging station to the hospital? And I was wondering if, with that collaboration with the hospital, is the hospital hoping that certain units will go? Is there a contract in place due to that collaboration on the units that are available?
Yeah, there isn't at this time. That's something that we've talked a little bit about with the hospital. I think you've heard Tom Mannion's testimony previously that 285 of his approximately 450 employees would income qualify for the housing being produced here. And our hope, and I think his hope, is that this housing will make it attractive for people who are at the hospital to stay at the hospital, and also make it attractive in the recruitment of folks. But we don't have, and we'll certainly be marketing out the door as units become available. Tom's going to know when that wait list opens. And I'm sure, his HR folks are going to be encouraging, folks to apply. So I expect a lot of folks, but we don't at this point. And it may change at this point, but it may change where we look at a handful of units. But at this point, we don't have units set aside for an agreement.
Thank you.
Yeah.
On the electric vehicle charging stations, with an amendment that we just adopted at town meeting, or at voting last Tuesday, when they're on a residential site and they're restricted to the residents and their guests, it's an accessory use to the overall residential. If they were to be open to the public for general use, then it would require a special exception from the Zoning Board of Adjustment.
Well,
So we can cross that bridge once you get down there, but just be aware that
okay,
it's going to be open to
that's
the
great.
public.
Thank you for that.
Yep.
I have to confess, I didn't read the town meeting votes and figure that one out. So I appreciate that.
Yep.
I guess I was just thinking about parking and the parking lots in this community that are a little tight to get into. But then, of course, those are for retail establishments. So it really wouldn't matter for a residence to have a smaller space.
Yeah, and sometimes we see compact parking spaces, especially in retail lots where they're trying to achieve parking to meet requirements, and those can be as small as 8 feet wide and 15 feet long. And I find that 8 feet just is narrow. It's uncomfortable even in a smaller car. So we see 9 a lot, and that I find to be a comfortable width. The 18, the nice thing is it's 18 from the toe of the space to the curb line. So a lot of people end up parking their cars, use the curb as the wheel stop. So the spaces will be long enough to really accommodate vehicles. And we aren't proposing for any of them to be that reduced sort of compact width, because people inevitably, they're not available when the compact car's there and vice versa. So we didn't mix that in.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Other questions from the board? Do we have questions from the public? Can you come forward, please, and just state your name for the record? Thank you.
Judy Cooper. Question on the space reduction, does that apply to the ADA spaces?
Aaron, do you want to talk about that?
The number of ADA spaces. No, yeah, for those at home. No, the number of ADA spaces complies with the number of parking spaces we're providing. So there's at least one in every parking lot. The first one is van accessible, and the number of spaces complies.
And the dimensions are...
Oh, the width,
right.
I apologize. An ADA space is 8 feet wide. So this does not apply. Even if we were providing parking spaces that were 10 by 20, an ADA space is 8 feet wide. The first van aisle is 8 feet, a standard aisle is 5 feet. So it does not impact the ADA spaces.
Thanks for that. Are there other questions from the public?
So did check in with the department heads again today. Nothing has changed since last week. They're satisfied with the plans as proposed. We do have a few different conditions that I've just been sort of keeping track of as the process has gone on. So perhaps it makes sense for me to just go down through those now and get you guys to weigh in on them. After that, we would review the waiver requests individually and then go through the finding of facts, take a vote. And then we will need 2 votes, one for the site plan and one for the annexation. So on the site plan, the first condition, the New London Springfield Water Precinct issues a connection permit to service the fire suppression system prior to the application for the zoning permit. So, and just for everyone, the zoning permit is essentially the equivalent of a building permit at the local level for multifamily and commercial. Condition number 2, a copy of the signed water line easement with the Fenwood Homeowners Association be supplied with the application for the zoning permit. Number 3, a copy of the signed sewer easement with the New London Hospital Association be supplied with the application for the zoning permit. Number 4, any vegetation impacting the sightlines for vehicles entering or exiting County Road will be maintained so as not to interfere. Number 5, the future community center project will be subject to site plan review at the time at which the owner wishes to move forward with the project. Number 6, Underwood engineers will affirm the resolution of any outstanding comments on the sewer review prior to the issuance of the zoning permit. So those were there any others that, Aaron, you guys had been keeping track of? No? Okay. Anyone from the board have others they were? Okay. I'm sorry? The well easement is internal to their own property, so okay. Yep. So the 7th condition is approval from the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services on the well system, or should we just say water supply system? Yep. So the AOT and state permits like that are required anyways, we don't really need to make conditional because they're subject to those DES reviews, and if they don't have them, they can't move on. So it's sort of self-regulating.
Did you cover the maintenance agreement for sewer?
And so the maintenance agreement for the sewer, we had, Janet was asking about the maintenance agreement for the sewer line.
That maintenance agreement will be part of the easement agreement that we have with the hospital, talking about the ongoing maintenance plan, frequency of cleanings, all that, right? We'll include it all in there.
Yep.
That's what we're envisioning. And just to be clear, that will be recorded.
Do you guys want me to move on to the finding of facts? I don't think the internal easement on the wellhead needs to be conditioned because it's on the existing property and it'll be on the plan that's submitted. You know, the property owners own both of them. Right, so it's part of that whole DES approval process. Okay. Yep. So the first finding of fact, the multifamily use and the density are allowable in the commercial zone. Number 2, the proposed lighting complies with the New London site plan review regulations. Number 3, with the approval of the waivers, the parking layout and number of spaces are deemed sufficient. Number 4, the traffic analysis conducted and reviewed is determined to not pose any significant impacts to the traffic patterns or volume of the immediate area. Number 5, the design provides sufficient measures for fire protection and emergency response through a sprinkler system and traffic circulation. So those are for the site plan, and then for the annexation, the facts are fairly simple in that both lots will meet the minimum size and road frontage required in each of their zones, because we are at a zone boundary here, so they'll be in 2 different zoning districts. Sorry, Paul, can you use the microphone just so that the recording gets you?
I'm sorry, do we need to add drainage, review a drainage
In what capacity? Or,
on the site plan?
so that would be part of the approval, since it's in the site plan packet, so it'd just be part of the package. So if there's no more comments, you can ask for any additional public comment and then vote on waivers.
Let's do that. Any other comments from the public on this one? Okay. So let's take do you want to take the waivers?
Yep, so the first waiver we have is to reduce the number of required parking spaces from 120 to 90, with 109 spaces actually provided, including the charging spaces and ADA spaces.
I move to approve waiver number 1.
Great. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed or abstained?
Okay.
Thank you.
And then the second waiver is the parking space dimensions to reduce from 10 by 20 to 9 by 18 with a 24-foot aisle.
I move to approve waiver number 2.
Second.
Great. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed or abstained? Thank you.
Okay, so now then the full motion on the site plan application total and then the annexation.
Yep. Anyone?
I move to approve. Do I have to restate all of those?
You don't. You can say with the 7 conditions.
With the 7 conditions.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed or abstaining? Thank you.
Okay. And then this is the annexation, which I did not propose any conditions for, but
we just had and we read the finding of facts.
Correct.
So,
Yep.
is there a motion for this one?
I move to approve the annexation.
Great. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed or abstained? Okay. Thank you.
thanks. So we don't have anything else. We can adjourn. And so we are still planning to meet next Tuesday as of right now. I'll be in touch if that changes, but we do have 1 application.
So, Andrew, when do you hope to start?
Let's take a motion to adjourn.
Can I just get a motion to adjourn? One second.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for coming.